I've recreated Durin's special recipe, the apple stew trial version from Genshin Impact. So even though the dish is called a stew, the image shows a large piece of meat, so I'm gonna approach this more as a braised beef dish than just a stew dish. For the cut of meat, there's a few options. I think the best cut would be a chuck roast, and that's what I thought I had here, but I didn't read the label close enough, and this is actually a sirloin tip roast, which still works, but it's a bit leaner. I'm cutting the meat into thick slices. I wasn't sure how the meat would turn out if I left it whole and then cut it after braising. The piece of meat in Durin's recipe is circular, and my pieces are more triangular, so I'm gonna have to be a bit creative during the plating later. Once the meat has been cut, I'm gonna lightly salt the meat and sear the pieces in a preheated pot with oil. Once both sides of the meat has been seared, I'm setting aside the beef and then adding some butter and tomato paste. I'm gonna cook down the tomato paste a bit and then add onions and sweat those out for a few minutes, and then dice carrots and minced garlic. I'm sauteing for just a minute before adding an apple cider to deglaze, and then I'm adding beef broth. To season, I'm adding salt, black pepper, ground cloves, ground nutmeg, and a pinch of cinnamon. And then to really lean into the apple flavor, I'm adding grated apple. All I did was take a peeled apple and grate it to help it melt into the stew a bit more during the simmering process. And then a couple of bay leaves, and I'll let this come up to a boil and then reduce the heat down to let it simmer. Once the liquid is simmering, I'm placing the seared beef back into the liquid. Let this simmer on low heat for about an hour or two, depending on the cut of beef. Since I'm using a leaner sirloin tip, I'm only simmering for about an hour, but if I was doing a chuck roast, I'd probably lean more towards 2 hours. Here's what it looks like after an hour of simmering. I wasn't too happy with the little pieces of carrot and apple, so I removed the beef and blended the sauce until smooth. This is what it looks like, and I'll keep simmering the sauce until it's thickened up just a little bit more while I work on the mashed potatoes. The mashed potatoes are pretty standard. I'm putting some boiled potatoes through a ricer and then mixing the melted butter and cream until I get smooth mashed potatoes. Now onto plating. This sauce here is just a simmered sauce mixed with a bit of ketchup to turn it red. Then a pile of the mashed potatoes. Since my beef pieces are basically triangles, I combined two pieces to create this wonky square circle shape on top of the mashed potatoes. Then for the garnishes, here's my attempt at being artistic, and then I'll take a toothpick to create little spikes in the red sauce, and then add a couple more cherry tomatoes around the plate. Then I'll create an X shape on top of the beef using some cream, and finally garnish with chopped herbs. And that completes Durin's special recipe, the apple stew trial version from Genshin Impact.